Have you ever wanted to build a fully responsive web application using nothing but Python? Now you can with Anvil. Anvil is a platform as a service offering that provides you with a drag and drop UI to build web applications. You can then use Python to write the front end and back end logic of your app. That's right, you can have a completely modern web app without having to write any JavaScript, HTML, or CSS. As a back-end developer who creates web apps, this is a really exciting concept to me. In this video, I will show you how to create and publish your first web application in Anvil. The application that we are going to create is a stock picker. The user will select a stock from a drop-down list, and our app will go out and fetch the latest price data. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so before we hop into the tutorial, I just wanted to mention that this is a sponsored video, and there are links down below that will bring you to Anvil's website, as well as the GitHub repository of the code I used to create the app. We're going to use the free tier of Anvil, but they do offer paid options if your application requires additional functionality. With that out of the way, let's start building our application. Alright, so we are on the Anvil Works website, and you can see here that you can build full stack web applications with nothing but Python. So to get started off, just go over to the top right here and go start building. It's going to ask you to create a free account. I'm just going to log in with my Google since I've already created an account. Alright, so once you log in, you might get a message in regards to a beta editor, depending when you watch this video in the future. I'm just going to close this out. I'm already using the beta editor, so I'm going to be doing this whole tutorial using that editor. So you can see they have a couple different templates you can choose from if you just want a static website or a survey or an online shop. It gives you those options. I'm just going to go ahead and start a blank app, because I think that's the best way for you guys to learn this. So let's go in here. Now it's going to ask you which theme you want, and I'm going to use this material design theme because I think it looks pretty nice. So let's go in here. You can see it's just generating the initial application, and we're met with this nice GUI where we can just drag and drop elements. So just a quick survey of the land here. You have your application name here. So you can just name it whatever you want. And I'm going to name this one my stock application. And it gives you some other things that you can do, like you can choose the logo or a description. But this is good enough for us right here. So I'll close this out. This is our main pane here. And you can see we can go between the design and the code, or you can split it up. So let's stick with the design and start building this website out. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and click run. And you can see that it's going to build our application. And right now it's just a blue bar. So let's actually start building things out here. So I'm just going to grab a label here. And I'm going to call this my stock application. And that's going to make a nice little title bar for us. And now let's do a couple cards. And this is just a good way to organize the elements in your page. And let's give a little label here. And we'll say pick a stock, drag a drop down list here. And then you can fill out the elements in the list. For now, I'm just going to put a couple placeholder items, but I'll show you how you can dynamically populate this list using Python. So let's just go Apple and Tesla. The next thing I want to do is I want it so when you pick a stock, it's going to give you the stock ticker that you picked, as well as the price, which it's going to grab from an external API. So just to sort of scaffold this out, let's pull over a label and maybe a couple labels here. And I'll just sort of organize this on the fly. I like using this flow one here. And you can see you can put your labels in that flow and it puts them right next to each other. So this really just saves you time of not having to mess with HTML or CSS. It really just helps you scaffold out a website and have it ready to run just by dragging and dropping. So let's give these a couple names here. So we'll go picker, And you can see there's more options to customize what this text looks like. I'm going to go more and make it bold. And then for this one, I'm going to call it price. And then make it bold. And then for these two labels, I'm going to populate this using Python code. So I want to make sure that they have a name that's easy for me to remember when I need to reference them. So for this top one, I'm going to edit the name and I'm going to call it stock ticker. And over here, I will call it stock price. And then for this drop-down list, let's see, drop-down one, let's call it drop-down stocks. There we go. So now that we have this built, I'm going to hit restart here. And you can see that our application looks pretty nice here from just dragging and dropping a few different elements. We have a list of stocks we can pick, and then a ticker and a price. So now that we have our simple UI built, let's go ahead and implement some Python code to get this working. Now, before we start building this, I should mention that Anvil actually has pretty good documentation for when you're building an application. So if you ever want to look into one of these elements or how to call a server function or something like that, you can just go over to Anvil Docs. There's a quick start guide, and anything you need to know is referenced here. This is what I use to build the application that we're going to build here. I also have a GitHub in the description below, so you can take the code that I'm writing and use it on your end, or you can just follow along as I'm writing the code. So let's hop on back to our application here, and you can see this side panel, and this side panel allows you to navigate through the different things that you can do with your application. So let's hit app here. And you can see how this is broken down. You have your assets, so this is your theme, your CSS files, and then you have client code and then your server code. So the client code is sort of reserved for any element on the website that you interact with, and then for your server code you can put in functions, and then your client code can call those functions. So I hope that makes sense. It's going to make a lot more sense as we go through this tutorial and I show you how to do both. So let's hop into client code here. You can see I have form 1 selected, and I'm just going to go to code. And here you can see the Python code, and it looks like any other Python file. You can see that our imports are up top, and then we have our form element. And then within here, it's just a constructor building the form class. So now what we want to do here is build a function. So when we pick a stock from that drop-down list, it fills out the ticker symbol as well as the price. Now we could build the function directly in Python just by typing it out, or we could go back to the GUI, click our little drop-down list here, and then scroll to the bottom, and it has different events. Now, if you're familiar with JavaScript, this probably makes quite a bit of sense to you, but if not, you can just sort of hover over here, and it tells you what the event is. So the show is when the dropdown is shown on the screen for the first time. Hide is when the dropdown is removed from the screen, and the change is when an item is selected. So for us, we're interested in the event of when an item is selected. So all we have to do is click in here, or click this button, the little blue button, and you can see when we did that, it built out our function for us. So let's change this. So instead of just doing a pass, we can change it to alert and just go, you selected stock. And let's try this out. Restart. And now when we select something, we get an alert, you selected a stock. Perfect, so that's a good start. Let's go ahead and up this a little bit by adding in the stock name that you selected. So I'm just going to put a space here, and then go plus. And now we want to reference the variable of what was selected. So if I type in self, you can see that it's giving me a lot of suggestions, and basically these are all the objects within our application. So let's go dot, and then it was drop down stocks, and I think that's enough to get it working. So let's try this. And apparently not. I believe I actually need to reference, yes, okay. So you can see that self.dropdownStocks actually has some values of itself. I wanted selected value. So let's do that. And now when we restart this, when we select a new stock, it's going to show us the selected value. So hit Tesla, you selected stock Tesla. Apple, you selected stock Apple. Perfect. That's a good start. Let's go ahead and instead of doing an alert, let's populate the ticker field and just like a baseline price field down here. So I'm going to comment out this alert. So let's think about this for a second. If I want to change the value of this, then all I really need to do is reference it and set the value. So to do that is I will go self.stock, not stick, ticker, and then I want to reference the text of this object and set the text to the value of whatever dropdown is selected. So I'll just copy this and paste it there, and that should do that one. And let's just copy this line, and then we'll just set the price to just a string of $100, and we'll dynamically grab that from stock API later on. But let's just put a placeholder of 100 there for now. Okay, so restart and select, and you can see Tesla 100, Apple 100. Perfect. All right, so it was pretty simple to get to this point. Let's go ahead and instead of just putting in $100, let's go ahead and go out to the internet and find out what the actual price of these stocks are using a stock API. All right, so the one that I'm choosing here is FinHub, just because they have a free, simple one to use. But you can use any API that you want and follow this tutorial, and you should get the same result. And this doesn't have to be for stocks or anything like that. It's basically just any way you want to get data into your application using an API, you can just follow the same methodology that I'm using. Okay, so once you have an account, you can go into the API documentation and look at the API documentation there. I'm going to put the endpoint URLs in my GitHub, so you can just grab the same ones that I'm using there. I already have it saved. So let's head on back to our application, and then under server code, let's go add server module. And then here you can see it created some Python code. I'm going to go ahead and import the requests library. And requests, of course, allows you to go out to the internet and just like request data and pull it back. So there's two functions that I want to do in our beginner application here. The first one is to dynamically populate this list, and the second one is to make this price populate based on the ticker symbol that is selected. So let's start off with dynamically populating this list. So I'm going to create a function here. I'm going to go get tickers. And I'm just going to go tickers equals, and then I'm going to specify a few. So I'll go Apple, Tesla, GameStop, AMC, of course. Everyone's favorite four. So let's put that in. And all our function is going to do is return this list. So this is a pretty simple function. Basically, it takes this list and returns it as an object. Of course, you could dynamically populate this using the request module, pull it from a certain place, maybe import it from a spreadsheet, but let's just keep this simple here to show the functionality. So let's hop on back to our form, and then underneath these init parameters, let's go self dot drop down stocks, and then we want to mess with the items here. And then we go anvil.server.call, and we'll say get tickers. So a couple things that I want to go over with this line of code here is this drop-down stocks here. You can see if I go to design, that's this element name right here. And then items is this. So we're going to dynamically populate this when our Python code is first substantiated. So I can actually take these values out here, and they will dynamically populate using that function. So let's head on back to the code. So that was the first part. The second part is it's going anvil.server.call. This is referencing our server module here, and then within that, it's referencing the actual function that we defined within that server module. Make sure to reference this as a string. So go here, you can see it's get ticker. So let's actually fix that so it's the same in both. So we want get tickers. Okay, so I think that's enough to get our stock list to dynamically populate here. Let's go ahead and restart our app. And I have an error of some sort. So this is a good time to point out the errors. So it says anvil.server, no server function matching get tickers has been registered. Line 13, form 1. Okay, so we have a good idea where the error is. And actually, I think our form 1 code is fine. What the actual problem is I did not register this function under here. If I referenced the Anvil documentation and just copy and pasted the code from there, I wouldn't have ran into this issue. So make sure you look at that documentation. But basically what I needed to do here was add a decorator to this function to allow it to be callable from our form 1. So to do that, all I need to do is go at and then go Anvil server callable, and you can see it auto completes there. So I think that should fix it. Let's go ahead and restart, and there we go. It looks a little bit better here, and we can switch, and there we go. We got the 4 different options, and everything else seems to be working as expected. So let's go ahead and continue our development. So the next thing we want to do is dynamically populate this price based on this ticker. So let's create a new function underneath our server module, and we can copy this decorator and then just create a new function and go call it get price. And we want to pass in our ticker symbol. And basically what we want this function to do is go out to the FinHub API and get the price of the ticker that we send it. So the URL I'm going to use here is this one right here, and it's in my GitHub again. And you can see when we search for it, I have the ticker symbol Apple, and it returns me the price of Apple. So let's go ahead and hard code this in, and then we're going to use the ticker as a variable, and it'll make it so when we select any of our stocks, it uses that variable in the request header. So let's start off with our object, and we'll go requests.get, and then we'll put in our URL. And then we'll say price equals r.json. And the value of the JSON was this C option. I'll make this a little larger here. You can see price is referenced as C. I think that just means current. So we'll go back here and go C. Now, if any of this isn't making any sense, I highly recommend you look into the request module and how it works. It really allows you to work with these APIs, and it's quite simple to use once you've used it a few times. So anyways, let's continue. We have our price. Let's return it now. So we'll go return price. And I deleted some things I shouldn't have there. That looks better. So this should work. Now we need to take this function and call it from our form. So let's head on back to our form. So in most Python applications, the way you would call a function is just like get price and then have in your arguments there, right? But for Anvil, we actually need to use this Anvil server call function again. So let's do it that way. So we'll go anvil.server.call, and then we want to give it that function. So we'll go get price. And the way you send your arguments to the function is you just add them after. So we'll say ticker. Go ahead and restart our app. And then select. And it's saying ticker is not defined. So let's go ahead and define ticker and define it as this. Go ticker, that, and then let's actually refactor this a little bit, make our code a little bit cleaner here. Basically, when we change the drop-down list, it's going to be calling this function, which sets the ticker to be the selected value, and then this guy will become the ticker. Okay, so restart. Tesla. There we go. And you can see it's getting the price. But it's doing 146 for all these stocks, and that's because we have the URL hard-coded. So let's head on back to our server module, and instead of hard-coding Apple here, we can format this as an F string, and then change AAPL to be curly brackets ticker. And again, this is just an F string. This is very common in Python when you want to reference a variable within a string. So this should be enough to get our application fully functional. Let's go ahead and restart. And you can see when you select a stock, it gives you the price. So Tesla, 759. GME, 204. All right, so there you have it, a fully functional application up and running in just about no time. One thing I'm going to change here is when you first initiate the application, you can see Apple selected, but nothing is populated down there. So I'm actually going to go to design, and then on the show event, I'm going to do another function, and then I'm just going to copy and paste this same code and put it in. And I think this should fix our problem. There you go. When you first initiate it, you can see Apple is selected and everything is there. All right, so that's a simple enough way of getting it to work. Of course, this is duplicate code here and here, so you'd probably want to have a separate function and then just have these guys both reference that same function. That way you won't have duplicate code. Anyways, the last thing I want to show is how easy it is to actually publish this web application out to the world. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this, and then I'm going to hit this publish button and publish this app. You can see that it creates a unique URL over here. So mine is aliveuniquedesign.anvil.app. And then you have a couple different options here. You can switch to a private link so only you have access, or switch to a public link. Right now mine's set to public, so I'm just going to keep it as that so you guys can all access my application that I created here. There's other options here like switching to a custom domain. There's some pricing behind that, so if you're interested in that, I don't think it's too much per month, and you'll be able to have your own custom domain. Anyways, this is good enough for our application, so I'll go ahead and check it out. And you can see our application is live at this URL, and you can choose stock, and it's working just the way it did inside the editor. So anyways, that's all I have to show for this video. If you're interested in using Anvil, make sure to use the link down below. And let me know in the comments below if you want to see more tutorials on Anvil, or you just have any questions on an application that you think you could build in Anvil. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video.